everyone, my name is Sam. Thanks for checking out this video. If you get to the end and liked it, then subscribe, bell notification, and give the video a thumbs up. So, we are going to wrap up July. I haven't gotten back into, just because of life, posting Sunday wrap-up, so I thought for this month, at least, I'll give a little bit of like a little tiny little bit review thought thing on each book, so we can go over kind of what I read, peaks and highlights, and then just, I don't know, shit I learned in July. So I started off the month reading, finally, A Natural History of Dragons by Marie Brennan. This is the first book in the Lady Trent, I think it's a 5-book series that I have owned from Book Outlet for far too long. I read it, I enjoyed it, it's a solid 4 stars, and I will definitely be picking up the rest of the series. This is definitely more an adult-leaning book. I was wondering if it was going to balance on that YA genre, or YA audience, but it's definitely adult. And honestly, I'm always a sucker for a book with women going against gender norms of the time, which this has a buttload of. Then I read I'll Be the One. I was very hesitant to pick this one up because it is a contemporary, but in the end, it's hovering around a 3.5 out of, or 4 out of 5 stars for me. It was fun, it was cute, it was quick. I liked the message. I found some of the characters very frustrating, but they definitely were not intended to be likable characters. And you can definitely see a lot of fat phobia in this realm that I have definitely seen when you look in the K-pop world. Maybe not so blunt from like judges on shows, but you definitely see it in like every comment section on every article about, especially about women, that like there's this girl Leah from Litsy who like I was getting concerned that she had an eating disorder between one of the comebacks, because like she looked like she was gonna get blown over by a stiff wind because she was clearly losing a lot of weight. Like she was concerningly skinny, and I have a feeling it's because of the 5 girls in the group, she's the only one that's not a dancer, so she was probably practicing more and wasn't eating enough. So stop being assholes like that. I also listened to Once More Upon a Time by Roshni Chotsky. This is an Audible exclusive right now, at least. That was one of the free monthly picks that you get on Audible from Audible Originals. It was fun, it was cute, it was quick. Not my favorite Roshni Chotsky thing ever, but I enjoyed it. I also picked up Take a Hint, Danny Brown by Talia Hibbert, which is the sequel to Get a Clue, Get a Life, Chloe Brown. I really enjoyed that this book had a tiny little bit peek at Chloe and Red from the first book, but it then gives Danny and her boy toy in this the frat spotlight. I love Danny so much. You can see little bits of Chloe and her a little bit, so you can definitely see the connection of them being siblings, but I really enjoyed that her character as a whole, that she's a professor doing like women's studies, feminism essentially, and there's a discussion on anxiety, depression, grieving was a big thing, and the main character is also bisexual. So I love this. I'm also a sucker for anyone setting up a fake relationship for whatever reason, because you just know how this is gonna end. So it was definitely cute. I actually think I bounced back and forth, but I think I liked the main male lead in this one just a tiny bit more than I liked Red, which I'm kind of surprised, because Red has Jamie Fraser written all over him. I also picked up The Angel of Crows by Catherine Addison, I want to say it was. So I haven't read the author's other book. It's just had long waits on holds from the library. But this is a messing with Sherlock Holmes, and I don't even think I would say that it's a retelling. It's definitely more of a messing with the Sherlock Holmes world. But there is essentially Sir Arthur Conan Doyle is essentially the Sherlock, or he's the Watson character, and it reminds me an awful lot of the introduction of the BBC Sherlock, but it kind of diverts after that and does its own thing, where there's world where there's fallen angels and demons and vampires, and Moriarty and Irene Adler are part of this vampire guild. It's very interesting. I could see why it could be polarizing to some people, but I actually did really enjoyed it. I think it was, for someone who keeps reading Sherlock Holmes retellings and I'm like, no one's doing anything special with it, I feel like this gave me what I was looking for of, if you're gonna retell it, do something with it, mess with it, throw in some vampires, and like, it was just a pretty enjoyable read, and I wasn't totally sure where things were going to go, even though it is such a well-known series, and I've read the actual anthology of all the Sherlock Holmes stuff. I felt like I could still follow along and be interested in what was happening. So definitely, I think I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. Then I picked up Sex and Vanity by Kevin Kwan. This is the start of his new trilogy. It was optioned as soon as it came out, which doesn't totally surprise me. It has about a 3.5 star rating on Goodreads, which I know is kind of low, but I have a feeling an awful lot of people went into it and were like, oh, it's not like Crazy Rich Asians. It's not supposed to be. It's a retelling of A Room with the View, I think it's called, which I have never read, but apparently is a very well-known novella, I think. So, but I can't say it's similar, but I was explaining to my coworker the plot of this book, and she's like, that's basically A Room with a View. And I was like, okay, so it's pretty dead on. So I enjoyed it. Don't go into it thinking it's going to be Crazy Rich Asians. It's not. It's got the elaborate, wealthy world of it, but it's in the United States, and there's a bit of a time jump, and there's not so much of the Rachel and Nick sort of love story plot as much as there's a main character who falls in love with someone very quickly, kind of, or heavy infatuation. They're split apart for a plethora of reasons, including economic, and then they find themselves thrown back together in a couple of years, which is a rom-com setup if there ever was one. So in the end, I gave it like a 3.5 or 4 out of 5 stars. It was pretty good. Things in Jars by Jess Kidd was a pleasant read, and I finally read it to the tons of people who keep telling me to read it. I've read it now, okay? So it is a mystery Victorian era. Again, I'm kind of a sucker for women going against everything, and there's a female detective in this, and this like weird mermaid thing, and then like a child is gone missing, and you don't know exactly what happened to the child and who's responsible, because a bunch of people have done some sketchy stuff, and like, yeah, so very entertaining, lots of twists and turns. I didn't really know where it was going for most of the time, and I love the cover. The North American cover is actually really nice. So I'm definitely actually really happy that I own this too, because it's definitely going to be one that I want to come back and read every once in a while. So definitely enjoyed. I think it was another 4 out of 5 stars for me. I finally read We Unleash a Merciless Storm by Taylor K. Magia, which is the wrap-up to, I don't know what this actual series itself is called, but We Said the Dark on Fire was the first book, and this is the wrap-up to it. I think that was her first book as well, her debut book. So this switches POVs. So in the first one we have Daniela, I think that's her name, right? I think so. It's POV, and she, everything that happens at the end of the first book, and then we switch to Carmen's POV because of everything that happens, and they do come from vastly different worlds, and they do kind of, you know, keep missing each other an awful lot until they come together, and you have to find out exactly what Danielle has done to stay alive, because she was left married to that douchebag, and exactly what's going on with Carmen, going back to the rebellion, which she's been separated from for quite a while because she was undercover, and what exactly that means, and obviously it doesn't go as smoothly as we would hope. So, I enjoyed this. I think I liked book 1 a little bit more, but I think this was a pretty strong conclusion. I think at the end got a little bit chunky. I feel like things were kind of being rushed a little bit, and the scenes weren't quite as smooth of a transition, but I enjoyed it nonetheless. Storyteller by Tracy Chee kind of broke my heart. This is the 3rd and final book in the Reader Trilogy. I think that's what they've finally come to the conclusion of, that it's called the Reader Trilogy, because my first book says this book 1 of, or the second book, one of my books says, in a sea of ink and gold trilogy, and I was like, what is that? So this is a wrap-up. I can't really say much about the actual plot, because, oh, there's a bookmark. Because it's a conclusion, but it's heartbreaking in the end. I absolutely love her writing. I'm very excited to see what she's going to do in We Are Not Free, her contemporary release, which is coming out really soon, about the Japanese internment camps and the generational impact that has had. So I just think like this is a series that didn't get enough hype, and it's beautifully written, and I think it's one that everyone should read. I picked up Rage by Cora Carmack, which is the second book in the Stormheart series, the sequel to Roar, I think it is. Rain comes out very, very soon, or if I've posted this, maybe it has already come out, which is the wrap-up to this trilogy. I think I preferred book 1 to this one a little bit, just because I think it established Aurora a little bit more, and this one kind of just changes a little bit. Though I really did appreciate this focus on the relationship between her and her mother, because that whole relationship is very contentious because she does have powers. So I really enjoyed that. I'm very curious to see where everything's going to go. And when I do get Rain, because I don't have it pre-ordered, I'm probably going to wait for a sale. I do think I want to binge this whole series like all together, because plot-wise it's kind of all tied together. There's no big time kind of gap jumps from what I remember. So I think that'll be the best impact for me with this series. Seasons of the Storm by El Cosimano, which, despite my absolute love of this cover, was a DNF, and I did not enjoy it. I did not get very far into it. Unfortunately, I really struggled that a bunch of the information that was given in the summary was never actually given in the book, or at least as far in as I got. And it would have been helpful to have had that information at that early on the book based on everything that was happening. So, 'twas not for me, sadly, despite my excitement for it. I picked up Rather Weird by Andrew Caldecott. This was a weird as hell book. I think it's book 1 in a trilogy. I think all 3 of the books are out. They all have maps on the covers. So I am absolutely going to be continuing on with this series. I also would like to formally petition everyone to normalize using maps as covers because I fucking love this. Yeah, it's a very weird book. This town is kind of isolated for some mysterious reasons, and some just, yeah, they live in like the UK, but they kind of run themselves, but there's rules, like you can't teach history here, just all this weird stuff, and small town secrets kind of get unraveled. So it's a mixture of historical fiction, alternative fiction, and a little bit of fantasy elements thrown in there. It's very, very weird, very quirky, very adult book, but I enjoyed the heck out of it. I picked up Goddess in the Machine from my library, and I loved the cover that they did in the, I think it was Owl Crate box this month. They have pretty sprayed edges. The book is beautiful, and I think if I had gotten that book, if I was 5 years younger maybe, or even in my teens, I would have appreciated it more. It wasn't a bad book, there was nothing wrong with it, but I read it, and it kind of left my mind immediately. I think it was a relatively forgettable book, and I don't know that it offered anything new in this realm of YA sci-fis. I picked up True Life by Jay Kristoff, which is the sequel, or third book and conclusion to the Lifelike series. It is my second favorite of the series itself. I can't say much about it. It's got a little bit of a not everyone lives happily ever after sort of ending, but everything for the most part that I could think of gets wrapped up quite well, and it's not the most heartbreaking ending to a Jay Kristoff series I've ever gotten, which is a good thing in all honesty, but I enjoyed the characters. I, for the most part, really liked how everything did wrap up for everyone, and even though, you know, we always love it when everyone lives, I can appreciate why the ending happened. You know what I mean? I picked up My Calamity Jane by Cynthia Ham, Brody Ashton, and Jody Meadows, which was like I read like 3 westerns in a row or something like that almost this month. So this is, as you may be able to tell, actually I want to make sure there's it's Annie Oakley, right? Yes. Annie Oakley, and Calamity Jane are in the Wild West, and then there's this like werewolf plague going around. And as soon as I started the book, I was a little nervous because I definitely liked My Lady Jane far more than I liked My Plain Jane, just because history background, it focuses so much on the Tudors, and I picked up on these little elements that I just couldn't pick up on in My Plain Jane, though I did enjoy My Plain Jane. So I was wondering where this was going to go, and I think this definitely is better than My Plain Jane, but not as good as My Lady Jane. I loved just the mashup of the Western elements here with the werewolves, and Jane and Oakley's relationship, and there is this kind of questioning of gender norms and sexual orientation and everything in this time period, and then we wander around the Wild West, which is just an interesting kind of setting when you look at just like the lawlessness of a lot of those places, and just like towns popped up where they wanted, and like, can you imagine being like a robber like 100 years ago or something like that? Like, basically if you got out of the building, what were they gonna do? Like, you just gone. Like, what do they do? Like like, there's nothing. I also immediately was like, oh, I got into the zone for this book when, like, within the first paragraph or something like that, the authors were like, so this person is this person, this person is this person, and then we combined a bunch of characters we combined a bunch of historical people into one character. They were all named Billy, so we just mashed it up into a single one named Billy. And I was like, as someone who studied history where, like, every other person is named Ivan, I appreciate that. So I loved it. I definitely enjoyed this. I'm very excited to see what they're going to do with the next series, and I just like the tone and comedy of everything in this, while, you know, touching and making fun of just like things in that world or things in our world as well. I also picked up Elysium Girls by Kate Pentecost, and this is honestly like kind of a Western, which I knew it was going to be kind of a dystopian-y element, but I didn't realize it was going to have as much of a Western feel as it does. So in this like kind of abandoned town, they have like, there's these gods have been like, we're going to come back and destroy you if like you don't give us a bunch of like sacrifice stuff. So the town is kind of starving because they're trying to put together a pyre right? That's the word, of stuff to give to the gods so that they don't come back and like destroy the town. And at the same time, there's basically a plague. It's called like the dirt plague, where people just get suddenly sick and like start vomiting a bunch of dirt. And then they live in the desert in the middle of nowhere. And one of the main characters gets kicked out of the town and into like just the lawless land. So she meets people from that were also kicked out of that place, as well as just people that also live out there. And then we meet this character that's kind of sent down from the gods, and there's this whole weird thing with that. But honestly, this book does not get talked enough about. I freaking love the cover, but honestly, the writing was really strong, despite it being set in Oklahoma. Honestly, anything set in like the Midwest United States tends to like, I check out. But it felt like a totally different, like, just like its own place. Like, though it's set in like a physical geography that I know, it's made its own, it's messed with, and I just loved the characters. There's this kind of little bit of a trigger warning that is, the words are never really said that I can remember, because I kept waiting for them to say it because I was picking up hints, but one of the characters is kicked out of the city before the events of this book, because she murders her stepfather. And everyone's like, we don't know why, he was such a nice guy, you know, that he took in the kids after their mother died, and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, it turns out her younger sister was simple, and he was abusing that. And so she lost it one night. So it's never said, there's no details, but I just want to know, there's these sprinkles of that, like, something's wrong is going to feel in your stomach, right? So that's just there. But this is arguably one of my favorite books of the month. I did a reread, finally, of The Name by Alison Croghan, book 1 of the Pelennor series. It's a high-ass YA fantasy that I'm amazed that I never heard of when I was younger. I would have just gobbled the hell out of this. But our main character is picked up out of being in this, like, slave encampment. And then we find out, you know, she's connected to royalty, and someone is trying to help her because she's essentially like the chosen one and has all these powers that they have to start teaching her how to use because she grew up as a slave. And the schools aren't as safe as they hoped. So, yeah, that's really all I can say without any major spoilers. Loved the reread of it, and I definitely appreciated it more of everything that it was built. It's like, the author like made like this whole world. It's like, it's a massive thing, but despite all that information, I don't feel like it was overly dense, and I really, really like the main character a lot. I also read A Song of Wraith and Ruins by Roseanne Brown, which is the book 1 in her debut duology, I believe it's supposed to be. I don't want to say anything about this one because, like, I just want people to, like, go look it up and see all the reviews and the praise for it and truly appreciate it. The writing is fantastic. The characters are great. So many people get murdered in this book. So many. Like, just, there's so much death. Like, just, yeah, there's a lot of death. And the main character is incredibly flawed, but she's very, very likable of a character and a POV to follow. And there's this whole romance weird thing that goes on. So, highly recommend it. Another, arguably my favorite book of the month. I also picked up The Year of the Witching by Alexis Henderson, and this is, I think, another debut work. Kind of historical fiction, kind of fantasy. Main characters in this small village town, which is very heavily controlled by the local religion, which is very misogynistic, we shall say. And she goes into the forest and gets involved with essentially a blood curse that starts to attack the town. Really enjoyed it. The ending wasn't everything I hoped it was going to be, but I enjoyed it nonetheless. It's definitely a weird book, and also don't go into it expecting there to be a big, like, peak climax or anything like that. There's not. Also, don't go in expecting a ton of blood and murder the way I was, because there's actual blood droplets on the cover. There's not that. I think that's supposed to be tied to the blood curse. I also did a reread of Wake of Vultures by Lila Bowen. I'm very glad I did that, and it was enjoyable. I feel like I actually, like, retained it this time around, and I really like this world. Like, I just find the world interesting and all of, like, the structures put into it. The characters are great as well, but I feel like I was mostly interested in the world primarily of this, so I'm definitely going to continue reading on this series. I then picked up The Riddle, which was book 2 in the Book of Pelennor series, and I think I somehow liked this more than I liked book 1, which is pretty impressive. I cannot say a single thing about the summary because it would spoil the vast majority of the book itself and everything that happens in the naming. But it's just a continuation on in this world of trying to find a safe space to train this chosen one kind of character and finding out exactly who's evil, because the schools are not as safe as we thought, right? So definitely give it a read. Also, I know that sounds very Harry Potter-esque. It's not. It's definitely not Harry Potter-esque. Then I did a very quick reread of the Six of Crows duology, Six of Crows, and then the sequel, Crooked Kingdom. If you are interested, these are the UK collector's editions. I got them off Book Depository. And I will have to wait for the collector's editions of Shadow and Bone, because I am not spending $50 Canadian on those. That's not happening, so I'll have to wait for a sale. But I'm excited for those too, because I'm obsessed with the Grishaverse, okay? And lastly, I picked up I Kissed Alice by Anna Birch, which unfortunately did not do much for me. I did finish it, but it was just okay, and I was hoping it was going to be more than what it was. Okay, so let's talk. We'll go least to most favorite, as we normally do, I think. So I think least favorite, I'd have to go with I Kissed Alice by Anna Birch. I think in the end I gave us a 2 out of 5 stars. It was just okay for me. The cover is very adorable. I don't think it totally matched the tone of everything. There's like 3 main POVs, I think it is. I somehow disliked all of them, despite them all coming from very different backgrounds, despite them having, this book has a decent amount of queer representation, and there is that whole, instant message, AOL, mystery, romance thing going on, which are all elements that I enjoy. But I really disliked all of the characters, not just indifferent, really disliked them. So it was really difficult for me to even feign interest in any of their plots or stories, and I was just like, I really don't care if, you're all kind of just crappy people. So this just missed on a lot of fronts for me, unfortunately. I'm also confused why there's 2 main characters on the book, I'm also confused why on the cover there's 2 people. I get it's kind of supposed to be a couple, but the book itself, there's 3 POVs. It's not just about the romance. So I'm like, couldn't they have found a way to put 3 people on their cover, I think my most surprising read of the month was Elysium Girls by Kate Pentecost. Honestly, I was going in hoping I was going to like it, but no one has talked about this book. I don't think anyone freaking bought this book other than myself, despite the gorgeous cover. I just didn't hear anyone talking about it, and I'm really surprised because it has, I think, a lot of elements that we all, for the most part, enjoy, and I just wish more people bought it and read it, because I was going into being like, honestly, I'm buying it for the cover. If it's a good book, cherry on top of that. But I wanted it mostly because of the cover. But honestly, this is a book I'm so glad I own. I'm definitely going to come back and reread it. The characters, I love the main character especially, but just there's a lot of conflicts in this world, and there's a lot of twists and turns. I did not see, no, I shouldn't say that. I saw kind of where the direction was going as to who the big evil person at the end of everything was, but I didn't totally see why. And I think that the throwing in of a god by the gods, or sorry, a demon by the gods to kind of try and win this game was something that I wasn't expecting, and it threw a lot of things into the air. And I think the side characters, they at least got a voice in a couple of the chapters to build the characters so you can kind of see them and understand why they are who they are. So pleasantly surprised by everything in this book. So I don't think any books that I read this month will be on my top books of the year that I read list. But that being said, I did really thoroughly enjoy A Song of Wraith and Ruins and My Calamity Jane. I think my not disappointment of this, it's just not as good as My Lady Jane, because I just connect so much more to the Tudors of that book, but it was enjoyable. For me to enjoy westerns, it says a lot. I'm not a big fan of westerns. And honestly, The Song of Wraith and Ruin, I've read a lot of YA fantasies that are kind of the same lately, and getting a book from an author that is just new, and that even if it doesn't necessarily have a ton of brand new fresh stuff, and it does use existing tropes and everything, and me still loving the characters and it being very blunt and honest. And then I found out too that English isn't this author's first language. Obviously, I think it's Nigerian is her first language. English is such a difficult language to learn. Isn't it I've seen studies somewhere of it's because there's so much so many exceptions to all of our grammar and structure and every rules. And then I read books by authors who their first language is English, and I'm like, what is this? And then the fact, just adding that element in, I'm even more impressed that I loved the writing, and then it was a debut author, and I didn't feel like I fell into traps, and it was just so freaking good. And then it hit New York Times bestsellers too, so I'm just so happy. I'm so excited for the sequel. I loved this book so much. It's another one I think everyone should read. And just, yeah. Lessons this month? I don't know that I learned many lessons from books this month other than I can enjoy Westerns. Also, don't put information in your book summary that you're not going to offer at the forefront of your book in the actual book when that information is crucial in understanding what the fuck is going on in your book. I also just felt this immense, that's not a word, immense proudness. I don't know. I finished several series. It's a pat on the back. I finished, The Storyteller, Rage. I'm, caught up on that one until the next one comes out. I'm finally dealing with the Books of Pelennor series. I finally reread The Wake of Vultures. I feel like I've gotten a lot of stuff actually done. My Calamity Jane, it was one of my most anticipated. I got it and I read it. I've been so good at, getting things done and then reading books as I'm getting them. So slowing down on how much I am buying, and reading the books pretty quickly when I do get them. Oh, that's another thing. I think I finally come out with a criteria for how I'm deciding if I'm buying books. So with, going forward past July now, I now have car payments. I've never had car payments before. And thankfully I didn't lose my job during COVID. My pay has stayed the same. And thankfully since March I haven't had to pay my student loan payments. But come September I will have to pay both car payments and my student loan payments on top of my rent and internet and phone and whatever bills. So, being more particular because I just don't have the same level of money to throw around the way I was before. So I've been kind of keeping it that right now my goal is to keep getting the monthly Goldsboro sci-fi fantasy membership because it's getting me out of my just reading more diversely, I guess, with books that I hadn't heard of. They're not picking Ready Player 2 or whatever it is. They're books that I'm genuinely interested in. The covers are awesome. They're signed. They do beautiful work on the sprayed edges. And it's reading outside of my realm. And I'm very, very excited about that. And then honestly looking at books that, if they're adult books that I know I want, I'm waiting for sales. That's what I've done with, I have the author of 10,000 Words of January. She has a new book coming out. And I waited and waited and waited until they had that book on sales for 30-40% off, and that's one that I love the cover. I know that I like the author's writing. I also have the book, the sequel to the Library of, what is it called? The sequel to the Library of the Unwritten, which is the Archive of the Forgotten. I waited until it was on sale. Rebecca Roanhorse's new book, I waited till it was on sale, and those again are I'm kind of sticking to, if you're not an author that I know I love that work of, that I'm not immensely backlogged on your back catalog, that they're on sale, that they have beautiful covers, that they're either sequels or works from authors that I love, or honestly, if the book is under $20, I will potentially give it a shot. And that has been really gearing me towards more of those contemporary, fun, lighthearted romances. That's why I picked up Beach Read. That's why I pre-ordered You Had Me at Ola. That's why I pre-ordered, or didn't pre-order, but bought Boyfriend Material, because they're keeping their prices reasonable, while I'm seeing a lot of YA publishers are creeping up. I've seen several. Alazzo I was really interested in. It's $30. I was looking at Bright Raven Skies by KK Perez, Christina Perez. It's $30. I'm not paying $30 for a YA fantasy. I'm sorry, that's just not happening, especially when they don't do any special designs on the covers. Whereas if I'm getting the Goldsboro thing with conversion and international shipping, yeah, it may be $50 for an adult book. But an adult hardcover in Canada with no designs is not much different in price range. So I think that's helped me kind of finally be okay, what YA books have you really been reading, especially YA, that you're I need to I'm glad I bought this first, because it's not been happening a lot. A Song of Wraith and Ruins was kind of an exception. My Calamity Jane was a sequel. So I'm let's just hold off on that sort of stuff. So that's where I'm at right now. Honestly, other than that, July I lost a lot of faith in humanity. People are arguing over just wearing a fucking mask. I don't know who needs to hear this, but doctors wear masks during surgery for hours, 8-12 hours. You're gonna be okay. I think most of you are just angry because you have bad breath. Maybe that's it. So brush your teeth more. Use some gum. I don't know why, just be empathetic of I don't know this, so Maybe I should just listen to professionals instead of thinking it's a giant conspiracy theory. Businesses have it littered all over their doors, their windows, their social media, just everywhere. It's not possible to not know what a place's mask policy is anymore. Going in and picking fights is just going to end up with you on the internet, and then you in a bunch of groups called Let's Get a Racist Fired because you inevitably say something racist, homophobic, bigot, just across the board. Just put like a I'm a racist thing on your Facebook profile and let it be. Okay? So I think that's everything from July. I don't know, what did you read in July? What did you think of any of these books if you've read them before too? I'd love to know. And, yeah, I'll put my social media and everything in the description box down below. Stay safe, wear a mask, Black Lives Matter. What else do we, get ready for whatever your back to school is gonna look like. Good, bless you parents. Good luck with whatever you do in there. And, yeah, I will see you all, next Tuesday, I think.